Now that we have learned how to warp our loom and create some Raya knots. By the way, if you wanted to learn how to create these Raya knots, go ahead and skip to the video that shows you how, but called Raya knots. But now let's begin our first row of plain weave. And to do that, you can weave with just your fingers, or you can use a shuttle. There's lots of different length shuttles and different reasons for using them. I've made some of these out of wood. It's sort of like a needle for weaving. It just helps weave the yarn in and out. And you can also use a ruler or a paintbrush or something to prop up the warp threads like this. Even a popsicle stick would work. Anything to raise the warp threads. I'll show you how to do this with a popsicle stick too. And what you'll do is take your shuttle. I'll start with a smaller one. And you're gonna put the end of the yarn through the eye or the opening. And if it works easily, just like this, great. If not, you can just bend the yarn a little bit at the end so it's a little smoother and not as fuzzy. Guide it through, pull a little bit. And then I actually just want you to tie it right on so that it doesn't fall off. So tie it right into a knot. Wrap one over the other, wrap it around and through, just like you would do the first step of tying your shoes. All right, now I have my warp thread propped up. I've got my Raya knots at the bottom that you don't have to have, but they're a fun textural addition. And I'm gonna start on the right, and it doesn't really matter if you begin going over or under, just as long as you are consistent with your pattern. So I'm gonna start by going over the first thread, under the next, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and pull. So I'm going to pull that thread until I get to the end. Keep going, and I don't want to pull it through, so I'm going to stop there and push my yarn down. You can even use a comb or a fork or something to comb down the yarn. I'll have these at your table to share. Now I ended my first row going underneath. So I have to start the next row on top, or it will fall right out, and you'll find that out easily if you do it the wrong way. No big deal, just try again. So I'm gonna go on top or over the yarn, under the next warp thread. Do you see how it's the opposite? Over, under, over, under. I'm gonna slide this down. Over, under, pull. All right, comb down the next row. Now another thing that I want you to notice is these warp threads that are straight up and down, we want them to stay straight up and down. If you start to pull too tightly, they'll go in like this, and you won't like it. So make sure that when you're weaving, as soon as you get to the end, you stop. All right, next row, I ended going underneath, so I'm gonna start on top, under, top, under, top, over, under, and pull. All right, I ended going under this warp thread, so I'm gonna go over it, under, over, under, over, under. I want you to think of this as like you're painting with yarn. So you can do so many different patterns and shapes, even just with this simple plain weave. You could weave half and stop, and then fill in your other color in between. You could make them like thin triangles. You could try to make little pictures. There's all kinds of things that you can do with this type of weaving. I'm gonna stop and fast forward the video a little bit so that you can see the next step. All right, now I'm at the point where I'm pretty much out of yarn. If my tail is really short, I could stop there, but since I have enough for maybe one more row, again, I'm gonna make sure my warp threads are straight up and down. My last stitch was under, so I'm gonna go over, under, over, under, over, under, and finish. And now, when I want a new color, I could do two things. I could try to hide this end by going through this little tunnel that's been created on the side with all of these little stitches. So I'm just going to take this and go through them all. It's a little tricky with these wooden ones. And this hides the end a little bit, but you could also just stop and trim it. So I'm just going to trim, rethread, and go again.